Let me just share a little bit about Mo's background, and I'll read it because it's written better than I could ever say it. Mo is the CEO and co-founder of Aptos, a blockchain designed for the next billion users. Mo is a three-time founder and expert in going from 0 to 1 and scaling products. Mo has led blockchain strategic partnerships for Novi, Facebook's wallet, founded Meridio, which is a platform to create and trade fractional ownership in real estate assets, and led strategy at Consensus. As a first generation immigrant, creating an accessible financial system for all is personal to Mo. And so let's dive into it. And I think that's actually a great place to start. You know, your story of where you started and how you came to the U.S. is a beautiful one. Maybe you could just talk about that for a little bit.
Sure. My parents, first of all, before I go into that, congratulations for all of you being in these seats. It's amazing that you're here. And it's truly my pleasure and my honor to share my story with you all. So just, I just wanted to say amazing that you guys are here. That's cool. And on that point of like these being very privileged seats to have, to make the most of them is something that's a reminder for me going back to my roots. My parents grew up in an area in Karachi, Pakistan, where you had to walk to get water, and in search of better opportunity, they immigrated to Abu Dhabi when they got married. I was born there. My younger sister was born there, and in Abu Dhabi, they realized education system is not going to be what they had imagined it would be. So it's still pretty bad. In this is 1980s, late 1980s, and my dad really pushed hard to see if there were other places for us to get a better education. He didn't even graduate from high school. During the first Bush administration, there was a massive push for immigration. And my dad and my mom both applied. My dad got rejected because that's how the lottery system worked. My mom had her master's degree, and she got luckily accepted. And my parents sold their wedding jewelry that they had and packed their bags up and moved to a place called Brighton Beach. It was not quite the beach that they were expecting.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Brighton Beach is like a very Orthodox Jewish section of Brooklyn. I think the beach is probably 20 miles, if that, from Brighton Beach. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's cold and gray as like New York is in winter times, obviously. But I grew up there, and it was a very, just an amazing upbringing for me, and how I look at the world today, and how diverse Brooklyn was itself. And so, and even looking at the crowd here, there's people that come from all walks of life, which is beautiful. It's a representation of the universe, and that really shaped my perspective in life journey to eventually getting to where I am today.
Awesome. And I mean, I think your dad and mom had to take a pretty big step back to be able to
They did.
like come to the U.S. and support your family there.
Yeah.
And you grew up in a pretty diverse neighborhood. You look different than everybody that lived there. I'm curious if that experience of coming to a new place, being different, influenced like how you thought about your career and ultimately led you to
Yeah.
do what you're doing.
No doubt about it. I mean, I think so. We grew up really poor, and I think that story. We were on two forms of welfare. My parents had three more kids, and we grew up in a basement apartment. My dad was working in a bedding factory in the morning and driving a taxi cab at night, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And we weren't able to move out of that basement apartment until I was 25 graduated out of college. But growing up, like, it didn't feel like I was poor inside my house, but kids are mean and bullies, and so I definitely got my ass kicked. I was very little and had a late stage growth spurt that wasn't really that big of a growth spurt. I'm like luckily average height now, and I loved basketball, so it just like made it even worse. But whether it was playing basketball in the streets of Brooklyn, which is a sport that I luckily still get to play here and there when I can, to growing up in a very different dynamic environment, it certainly thickens your skin. It makes you a little bit more resilient, I would say, and I think that resiliency is something that is incredibly valuable, almost more so than how you think about a strategic, product market fit plan, because you will fail. And as you were sort of naming all the different things I worked on, I was like, wow, I think I failed at all of those things. And you just have to have this incredible spirit of like, I failed. I'm going to get up and do it again and again and again and be really stubborn. And that's kind of, luckily the mentality that I had, because I mean, if I just, missed my shot or laid down on the floor after I got my ass kicked, I wouldn't be able to get up to where I am. And so, it is an important reminder to be able to have those types of environments and learn from them. Yeah.
And talk about how, I mean, one thing that I think is interesting about your path, right, is that you didn't start as a software engineer and then discover blockchains. You had like, you were, I'd call it like blue chip traditional. So, BlackRock, BCG, Facebook working, or actually, I guess consensus in between. Like, how did you go from, some of the most traditional firms in the U.S. to doing what you're doing?
Yeah. There's a funny story before I got to blue chips. You want me to share that one?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going off script here,
Yeah,
so you
please
make
do.
Jason nervous. So in I guess it was when did the iPod come out? That was what, 2000?
iPod 2003.
Yeah, 2003. So 2003, 2004, my best friend's dad had season Knicks tickets, and he was an accountant. And I was like, wow, I need to become an accountant so I can get season tickets to the Knicks. That was my framework and logic, right? And But the cool thing was the iPod came out, and I was like a total dweeb and excited about new technologies and played around with things like mini discs. And the user experience was abysmal, like getting music from Napster and like AOL chat rooms, and then like eventually putting it on a device to take with you. And while that was happening, basketball players were carrying CDs with them to games to get hyped up for the game. And I was like, this is inefficient to hold a CD player while you're warming up at a basketball game. And mini disc, and then of course the iPod came out. But people did not know how to put music on iPod at the time. The Apple Store was not there. I was able to sort of hack and do it in a much more efficient way through Napster and other, yeah.
That's how it was done.
That's how it was done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and so noticing that problem and having that wherewithal to say, I think there's something better we can do. After the Knicks games, we knew my friend and I would hang out and try to get signatures from the players. And so we knew where all the players were coming. And so we got a bunch of iPods, loaded them up with some hip hop songs, and tried to sell iPods to the NBA players. It worked.
And that's how
It worked.
that's how
Yeah.
you became a crypto
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
Yeah, and well, that's when I realized, wait, I can sell something, and if I solve a problem, and that was like my first entrepreneurial venture, and I was like, okay, this is like not a sustainable business. I'm gonna go work at a legitimate company and make my parents proud. And got to work at really cool places like RBC and BlackRock, where I learned financial systems and how money moves around the world, how it's created, how you create structured products, and the pain points that existed. BlackRock, we were talking about this earlier in 2012, were creating things called ETFs or iShares in-house, a passive investment product that was quite pioneering for them, and eventually helped them amass, all sorts of market data, build a fintech product called Aladdin, which allows them to do real-time risk management, or close to real-time risk management. And it was just interesting to see all these problems get solved within large companies. And the value just stayed there, and it took a lot of time for them to get there. While I was there and facing these sort of problems and building out stuff, my mentor pushed me to go to B school. I went to business school. I followed her guidance, not knowing what I don't know, and just trusting good, smart people around you to help give you perspective and shape your exposure. I went to BCG after business school, and BCG was an interesting time for me because I was a very fragmented thinker. I would have all these quirky ideas given the environment that I grew up in, but I wasn't able to really shape them into something where I can focus that energy to get to product market fit. And consulting helped really shape and help me create frameworks about how I think about going to market. And we were, Hadi's here. He works at Aptos too and leads a lot of our DeFi work. And we were just talking about having a framework for how we think about DeFi, for example. And some of the most simple frameworks end up being the most powerful frameworks. And so, being at these blue chip companies, you just learn a lot of like how business should be done, how products are built. but then you want to take that learning and apply it in a way that they can't, these large companies cannot move at the pace that you can, right? Here is a room of powerful founders that can move much faster, knowing the insides of these different companies and industries. And I think this is where, the amazing disruption will happen, especially using Web3. That was a long,
Awesome.
long,
Yeah,
long,
no,
that was a
thank you.
long
Thank you.
answer.
So one thing I think is amazing about the history and the founding story of Aptos, right, is that I mean, you guys were all at the time Facebook before it
Yes.
was Meta, working on Novi and DM.
Hmm.
For those of you who haven't been around as long as I have, which is actually all of you, the history of good innovative technology being invented within a big company and then spinning out and becoming its own thing is like, I mean, that happens
Hmm.
approximately like 0% of the time, because if you're in a big company and there is something good and new, either it becomes a product line of that company, or like all of the internal knives come out and attack it and kill it. But you guys are like the one case that I can think of where you recognized you had something powerful and unique inside Facebook. Novi and DM were on a downward trajectory due largely to regulatory issues actually outside of the core stuff that you were working on, just due to Facebook broadly, and you were able to take it outside and turn it into something. Like how the heck did you do that? How did that work?
Yeah, and I guess a part of this is also part two of the answer for the previous question. So like while I was at BCG, two central banks were trying to send money to each other using blockchain in 2016. And they were using R3 Corda, Hyperledger Fabric, and basically glorified databases. That project did not work out for them, or did not scale up, I should say. But I thought removing a bank out of the system was a very interesting use case for this technology. Consensus reached out to me afterwards, and I ended up joining Consensus in 2017 to help think about scaling Ethereum. And we learned that Ethereum has an amazing, it's programmable money, right? You now have a supercomputer, ideally, that's decentralized, that can, do all sorts of things that you can't do in centralized systems. The challenge with that was, though, if you tried to build a tokenization platform, which is what I was trying to do afterwards, and working on things like MetaMask, Truffle, and Infura, is that this technology was not moving at the rate we needed it to. The Ethereum Foundation's evolution was just slower. I ended up stumbling across Novi and Facebook building out the DM Libra blockchain. And what resonated to me was sort of the same mission that I was interested in, as part of my lifelong journey, I guess, is you have a way to disrupt the system in a way that there's a lot more efficiency. Novi wanted to move money peer to peer in a far more efficient way without having banks or middle parties involved. And it was a very bold mission, right? If Jason is in the UK and I'm in Pakistan, you want to send money to me and I rely on remittances. It sucks that MoneyGram and all these folks take 15% out of your, out of that dollar, and every penny matters to these people. And so, I kind of bit the bullet going from a very decentralized world of Consensus to a centralized entity, but I thought that mission was very valuable. But what was really interesting is where Ethereum sort of struggled to evolve and support use cases and these ambitions, Facebook was able to have an unfair advantage in that. I mean, you are working with some of the world's best engineers across Consensus, across distributed systems, cryptography, language experts, where we built our own smart contract language to try to build DM, not only the blockchain, but also the stablecoin and the wallet. And that was very scary, right? If you can send money peer to peer, I mean, Visa, MasterCard, DTCC, all these payment networks that exist today could be gone. And there was a lot of value for someone like a Shopify, an Uber, a Lyft, an eBay. All these folks that lose 2.5% on each transaction, and saw value in that for them. All of these people joined the DM Association. They saw the business case. It was clear as day. The people who did not see the business case or were afraid of it were folks that did not understand the technology. And so, it was a difficult path to market with either Switzerland regulators or UK or US regulators for us at the time. My co-founder and I, we were looking at each other like this is like 100 times better than Ethereum and anything out there. Like we got to get this out in market. And we eventually came to a point where we just knew it was not going to make it. And we were scratching our heads and thinking like, what do we do? How do we like get this out? The funny thing was all of this code was open source. And so that was a good, really good starting point, being fully aligned with the ethos of Web3 and being, out there in the open. We asked Facebook in October if we can find a path forward and work on this independently. We asked the leaders to let us leave. This is the most important mission for us. And they said no. And then we went back and we're like, well, how about it? We put a plan together and like beg again, which we did. And they were like, all right, why don't you refine the guy said no again. And then I was like, all right, they were like, can I make the plan better? They're like, okay, well, how would you fund it? And I was like, let me see if I can call some really important investors. November of 2021, I was in San Antonio with my wife for Thanksgiving. Avery, my co-founder and CTO, he's in California in Cupertino. And we were just on calls back and forth. Our families hated us during Thanksgiving week. I didn't come out of like the basement of my in-laws' house and put together the entire pitch deck and plan during the months of November and December, Christmas and Thanksgiving to Christmas. We were fortunate everyone took our meetings during that time. And, we met with a lot of folks and, A16Z obviously stood out head and shoulders above the rest and supported our vision in a way that we can go back to Facebook and say, hey, we have a plan. And that gave us the opportunity to run. And they said yes, and we did not look back. We were out. In December, I packed all my shit up from New York, got a mattress in Palo Alto. Actually, I lived in a hotel for a month. My wife was pissed because by the time she got back, she came to Palo Alto. There's just still a mattress on the floor, and we still live in the same apartment.
I was saying she's still pissed, but
yeah, the same mattress, but now it's elevated a few inches. It was a good move. But that's kind of the story, and just persistence again, right?
I think I mean one thing that always impressed me about the plan, right, was it was pretty gutsy to believe at that time that the world needed another layer one, right? I mean, Ethereum had a lot of traction, like was amassing a huge amount of developer mindshare. Solana had already launched. I'm curious, like what gave you the confidence that there was an opportunity for another layer one in the market, and I'm curious, like how have things worked out in that regard versus what versus your going in assumptions when you started the company?
I mean, there were a lot of. This is a very reflective moment for me. I feel like I need a couch. This is it actually, while we were convincing people, we had promises of people that would fund us, but we didn't have money either. That was another scary thing. I was just like, I don't have that much money left to pay for these things. So that's happening, and we're looking at all these protocols that are just very aggressively been in market or are doing well. But I think the conviction that we had in our technology relative to everything else went back to first principles. So if you look at Bitcoin, obviously that technology is designed to be, stone cold, solid, and does not get, it is what it is, and everyone loves it for that. Ethereum was supposed to evolve, but was facing challenges. If you want to build a technology that is evolutionary, that can keep up with the demand of all the products that you guys might be building, then you need something that has evolution built in it from the ground up. So, that just 3.5 years of pursuing that gave us the confidence that we still don't see any of this stuff evolving. And a lot of some of the smartest investors that we spoke with understood that. And so, we're very, very fortunate to have that from the get-go. And it was not an easy decision, right? Some of you guys are building, very difficult infrastructure. You have to have those first principles, cemented early on as you not only build your product out or design your architecture, but also as you build your community and the expectations that your community will have with you, of you. And that's something that I think resonated really well with the market. People knew that they needed infrastructure that would evolve for them, for their use cases. And if you look at the DeFi ecosystem today, if you look at the phenomenon that's going on with meme coins, it's showing the fractures that exist within these other protocols, just purely from a factual and technology perspective. Whereas if you compare that to Aptos, our infrastructure has not only evolved so substantively over the last 1.5 years of it being live, but we can support these use cases seamlessly. A transaction on our protocol does not scale with congestion on the network. Imagine you trying to ride a car on a highway and there's all this traffic and everyone's like, "Oh, the tolls are going up." That's not a public utility, right? That's a premium good, and I don't think we're in an environment where Web3 should be saying that it's a premium good. And we need to still prove out that this is a public utility that rivals that of the internet. I think that should be the ambition that we're all on.
And
Yeah.
one of the things you guys have done that, and you've spent a lot of time on this, is that you've gone deep with some of the biggest Web 2 players, like particularly Microsoft and Google. Talk about the decision to focus there as a customer and partner base rather than going deep on the more crypto native community. Why'd you decide to go that way? How's that worked out for you?
Yeah. This is a good question. I think I sort of balance myself between two worlds. The first world is going back to the point earlier that large companies can't evolve, and we haven't seen any new company that was disruptive be born inside of an existing company. So all of you all here are going to build something that will disrupt an existing industry or a business. That should be the goal. At the same time, large companies continue to exist and have power. And so, Jeff Bezos is famously kind of known for saying, don't only pay attention to what's going to change, but what will not change. I don't think Microsoft's going anywhere. I don't, all these folks will still retain massive distribution channels. And, we take a worldview of that. You need to work with the disruptors and also the old guard that will still maintain that power. And now, when you look at everything that's happening within different technologies outside of just Web3, we thought AI was a very important area for us to focus on. If we're sitting at a place where it's very difficult to understand, is content that I'm looking at, what is the provenance of it? And these are problems that have real business case even at the government level and as a national security threat, all the way to how content is being created and consumed across social and across media in general. We share that vision with someone like Microsoft, who's battling that problem. And finding these types of partners that have massive opportunity to solve these problems and applying Web3 to a real opportunity here, we thought was something powerful. And so finding someone like Microsoft and articulating that use case is very difficult. Large companies have their own agenda and their own life cycle.
Their own timeline that's very different than a startup timeline for
Very,
doing anything, right?
And you and I talk about this all the time. Well, you coach me on this all the time that, there's a risk with that. Partner risk is very real. And so, you want to be very, very thoughtful in terms of like who you partner with, who's the counterparty, why is this the innovation team or is this their proper business line? Is it going to have top line impact or bottom line impact? And so with Microsoft, we're fortunate to find the team that has real long-term impact within the intersection of AI and Web3 and specifically focusing on finance. And so we've been working very closely with them. Similarly, folks like Google have been valuable for us as partners that run a validator on our network. Google earns APT tokens. That's really cool, right? And so, having someone like Google along the way has been phenomenal too, because we started off completely on hey, we need cloud infrastructure to power our network. They ended up running a validator. Fast forward, 2 years from now, just being persistent with them and going deeper and deeper with them, we just launched our game on stack with them. And so now with Google, if you're building a Web3 game, if you're a large company already on GCP building a game and you want to add Web3 components, you can go directly into the Google Marketplace and use Aptos infrastructure instead of having to go find a wallet, a protocol, node and indexing services. And so it just makes it incredibly easy for large Web2 companies. And so, again, focusing on the old guard and then, making sure we're helping innovators innovate along the way.
Amazing. All right. One last question before we turn it over to you guys for your question. So, would love to know what's something that you know now that you wish you knew when you guys spun out from Facebook.
Ooh, was that on the list?
It was on my list.
What do I know now that I wish I knew when we spun out of Facebook?
Or put it a different way. Like, so has everything just worked exactly according to plan, or were there like bumps in the road that you had to learn from and adapt to and figure out?
Yes, hell no to that part. Nothing turned out the way we wanted it to, or we had dreamt it to be. And I think that's kind of the beauty of being an entrepreneur, right? Like you will all have big, bold dreams, and you should, continue to be a dreamer in that sense. But being really grounded in and being pragmatic in terms of like what is the day over day. Web3 is one of the hardest places to be an entrepreneur. The hardest. The market is so it's, neck whipping fast. On top of that, you're dealing with, you know, a very loose environment where it's uncertain in terms of how, you may get to product market fit. And I think the one thing that I wish I paid a little bit more attention to is actually doing a very simple framework shift. The beauty of being in Web3 is you can be really close to your customers faster than anyone else, whether it's your consumer or your developer as a customer, or maybe a large Web2 company. The Web2 company, obviously, you'll do it in a more private environment, but for everyone else, it's in the open sphere. It's on Twitter, it's on Discord, it's on Telegram, and man, it's brutal. When we launched the protocol, we were flooded to death. People talked shit about us, and we're like, wow, we really fucked it up, and that didn't feel good. But the interesting thing in that, where we reflected, and I think here's the answer to the question is, you get market feedback immediately, faster
Yeah,
than anywhere else.
yeah, no question. You can always benchmark where you are
It's
because people
crazy.
will tell you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I mean, if you have a token, you'll see it tonight, like instantly. Just one question for the crowd: like, have you used a Web3 product and you're like, wow, this is a delightful product that rivals a Web2 experience? Raise your hand. I want to know. Okay, so yeah, y'all are struggling, so I don't see proud hands going up. So I want to know what those products are that rival Web2 experience. I haven't used one, and I've been in this space for 10 years almost. And so, is it really product market fit, or is it more market product fit?
I don't know. Tell me.
I think this is a really important question that I've been like scratching my head about, and I wish I knew earlier on, because you can easily go out and tease something in the market on Twitter, on Discord, and Telegram, get feedback immediately from your community without even having a product. They'll tell you, and I think that allows you to have that's a superpower for Web3. You can iterate faster without having risked engineering and product cycles. And I think that's something that I wish I knew when we spun out of Facebook.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah.
The floor is yours. I told Mo that based on our experience a couple weeks ago that you guys were a very direct group, and so he should be prepared for those questions, and that he was free to answer directly. So bring it.
Thanks for the talk. One thing I wanted to ask was how you guys kind of got a lot of these native protocols to Aptos, because you were kind of a later mover, especially of having the newer VM as well. How you guys fostered kind of those native protocols that are building on Aptos to really kick off that innovation on your chain? Because yeah, just curious about that.
Yeah, and sorry, what's your name and what are you building?
Oh, I'm Noah from NodeKit. We're building a communication layer between rollups. It allows synchronous communication when it used to be asynchronous.
Got it. Cool. So it's a really good point, right? Like, how do you get your first set of core anchor projects, your first set of customers, your very important users? I think there's no substitute for just knocking on doors, right? And I think for us, we were very lucky that I had really good relationships in the Ethereum ecosystem, and we were able to get feedback before going live and spending time with a lot of these projects. At the same time, how easy will it be to convince someone in the EVM world to come build on Aptos? Learn a new smart contract language, a new VM, and eventually get them to deploy. And so understanding what the business reason for them would be, like really understanding their problems and going deep into that allowed us to articulate and actually even better understand our own value proposition. Like why do we confirming why do we exist? Some said yes, others were like, meh, we'll come back to us in about a year and a half. We're pretty good on Ethereum. And then others were just like, don't waste our time. We're very happy being maxis of like X, Y, Z. And that's okay, right? Like you learn very quickly how to segment between where you want to spend your time, where you want to go back to someone, and like people you never want to talk to again. You need to find that that categorization for yourself. And the ones that said yes, we doubled down. We spent a lot of time with them, white gloved them end to end. And our team, learned a lot from white gloving them, engineering, product, even, legal. So it was very helpful for us. It feels like it's just an unfair waste of time potentially, but these folks and just become, they're your customers for life. What is it, like 20% of fanatic customers are like 80% of the value in an enterprise at times, right? And so that's that. The second was over time, you will see that if you do get your core set of users right, they will help build a lot of the rest of your community out, the rest of your strategy out. And you should encourage them to talk about their stories, their cases, and whatever it might be. And now, we just hosted Hong Kong DeFi Summit last week, where we had protocols like Aave and Stani come and talk about how Move is very interesting. Right, a year and a half ago, I don't think Stani would be very interested. Right now that he sees the performance of the protocol, we've de-risked their ability to come online, right? And so all these other protocols, like they're like, oh, we're turning off today. We'll be back tomorrow. How does that work in a 24/7 hour crypto market, right? And so by showcasing obviously your product and how it stands on its own feet, I think is equally as valuable as the amount of work you put in and that high touch for your community.
Okay, thanks. That really helps.
No problem.
You mentioned that you work with Web2 and Web3 companies. What lessons have you learned when it comes to positioning and messaging, straddling the two?
And sorry, what's your name?
Hirsch. I'm from Value Network, and we use smart contracts to provide trusted data to AI models and applications. We've actually worked together when you were working on Pangea way back in the day.
Throwback.
But yeah, we should have a catch up.
Okay. So I mean, how do you really think about Web2 and Web3 companies and aligning the messaging between the market positioning? Man, that's a good question.
Can you effectively go after both, or do you think you have to be focused on one versus the other?
This is a good question, and it kind of goes back to your question of like what what I would have done differently too. I think I would double down on Web3, but operate with Web2 principles, because all the Web2 companies, they're not really thinking about how does Web3 impact my business at like the very specific business line. They're more depending on the business, of course, but I'm kind of answering this for your perspective. Like let's say an entertainment company that wants to use your smart contracts, for example, they're going to want to know like who's used this before and what impact have they had, and you should ideally be able to point to case studies that indicate that. Those probably aren't going to be Web2 companies at the onset. They're likely going to be Web3 companies. They'll be faster to adopt, higher velocity, variety of different use cases. And I think I would really focus on Web3 rather than trying to, convince Web2 to use Web3. It's a painful decision, honestly. Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
Well, and it's also particularly hard, right? Because it's obvious that all the money today is in Web2. I mean, right? You have multiple companies with $1 trillion plus market caps. They are all like massively cash flow positive, but the problem is they have no urgency or real need to come over to Web3. And where it gets confusing is that every company has some amount of money set aside to experiment with new things to make sure that they don't miss like a massive new wave. And so you can get fooled if you like you can get a proof of concept or a pilot with a big company and think like, oh yeah, like this is the first sign of everybody coming over en masse. But it almost, I mean, this happened a ton in like 2008, 2009 when social networking was just going vertical, like and before the advertising model was really figured out. There, like every big brand, and we saw this actually in 2021, like with brands doing experiments in Web3. But then when times got tough or the initial experiment didn't pan out, they all retrench. But I think that the hardcore Web3 entrepreneurs and companies and projects like all stayed the course.
Yeah. And there's a really good case study today that kind of demonstrate this.
Michelle, I'm with Tweed. We are a wallet as a service and payment infrastructure, focusing on easy onboarding of users and monetizing them. We are chain agnostic, not yet on Aptos, but we can talk after.
Okay.
My question to you is more on your playbook and view on competition, entering a space that's already pretty crowded with kind of very set leaders. What was your perspective on it then? What is your perspective on it now? And also kind of two questions, follow-up is, what do you see today is Aptos' like main kind of advantage over the rest? And what are some of the things that you admire about others that you can share?
Oh, there's multiple questions there. So, okay, I'll start with the first one and then maybe I'll remember the second one. So I think entering a crowded market isn't something you should worry about in Web3. There's still barely, 1 million daily active users. Like think about the internet, right? There's billions of daily active users. And so, and the fact that you're building a wallet and here means that there is plenty of space for you to, have a competing product. Now, with that being said, what is your differentiation? What is your different strategy? How is your product going to stand out? What is your sort of go-to-market that's going to be unique? Are you going to go out and just target meme coins and be visceral in terms of reactions that you get on Twitter? I don't know. It might work really well. And so I think, and the benefit of that, by the way, is you've learned from the mistakes of all these other projects that have not been able to get 1 billion users. And I think there's something really powerful about that. And you were at Google, right? Like Google wasn't the first search engine.
Not by a long shot, yeah.
Right. And by a long shot. They were late to the party, and like, why would they even try? How dare they? And they completely blew it out of the water. They, in fact, learned so much from the other previous incumbents that they built a product so differentiated with amazing technology that they grew the market for search. And so that's the position and the philosophy, or like the mentality that I would sort of approach this world with. You have, 5 billion users that aren't using your product yet. So that's how I think about it. What was your second question? Sorry.
The second was around what you see as your advantages today and kind of other things that you admire about other chains competitors.
Oh, for us specifically? I mean, I think so when I look at other protocols, they've done, a great job of building their respective communities, and they're primarily founder-led personalities. You see that permeate into the community that they build, and it's interesting to observe that. And I think you have you have your rainbow of personalities there. And so I think Avery and I and our team embody, our principles and our philosophy of, building amazing technology and letting it speak for itself. We're not first to the party either. We're pretty late. And you reminded me of that. But the good thing is, similar to Google, right? Like they still, like when you do your search, it still says search completed under 0.38 seconds.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of subtly just flexing and reminding you that we have the best tech. That's what we like to say too. So, we have the best tech, and I think over time, if you have an amazing wallet that needs 1 billion users, guess what? It's not going to run on those other protocols. You're going to need sub-second finality to rival Web2 users. You're going to need very low gas fees. You're going to want to avoid congestion. You're going to want to avoid downtime. And Aptos is probably the only protocol that can do that today.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on? My name's Soren. I'm one of the founders of Titles. We build creative tools powered by artist-owned AI models. I'm curious, like building a protocol, what specific kind of tentpole items that you guys define product market fit as? And are there any specifics to like building in this space that you find unique for product market fit versus like previous projects and companies that you've worked at?
I mean, effectively, like, where's Web3 good, right, today? And um, the product market fit is kind of almost obvious, right? Again, like, you can go on Twitter and see what people are talking about, and everything is on chain, so you can see what people are doing. And so, depending on where you sort of focus your lens, it may not necessarily fall within any of those categories, unfortunately, right? So you're going into a completely different industry, and ideally trying to disrupt them. So, for us specifically, I can answer this question more for the room than for you, and we can chat about it at the happy hour. But you know, we think about financial systems. And the reason for that is, what is a blockchain really good at? You can have programmatic assets. Now, are those programmatic assets going to be NFTs that scale to, mass adoption? It's probably not likely yet. Well, cookies are evolving, and like information availability is evolving, but I don't see that effective immediately. Where we do see real, product market fit is in financial systems where, money can't move as efficiently as it should. If there was a stable coin on Aptos that was native, that money would move faster than any other form of money in the world, faster than Visa and MasterCard. And that to us is very interesting. Now, how do you get to that and execute? It's a very complicated system. Like, you can't go knock on Visa's door and say, "Hey guys, we're gonna kill you soon." Um, it's a good way to get thrown out of the office, probably. Um, Instead, I think you want to, let them know in roundabout ways, right? And I think DeFi primitives do a great job of that. Right, the velocity of money that moves within the DeFi ecosystem is faster, and it's 24/7, and so where capital markets and money movement are not today. You're still dealing with T+2 and a very complicated money movement system. And so by us working and focusing on things like DeFi, and Hadi can talk about that in more detail later today too, we think that's a great place to start. Now, the tools that you build there, test your protocol, harden it. You might get really good smart contracts out of there. You might get TVL that you can use and extend into other areas like meme coins or NFTs and all this other fun stuff. And so, certainly thinking about how one building block or one category and industry can help then be sort of a solve the cold start problem for the next industry. And so that's kind of how we approach it. So we think from finance, that can then tie over into gaming, which is where we have 25 games that'll be launching on Aptos in the coming 12 months. To then from there, working with media and entertainment companies.
So to your point about financial systems, one of the biggest issues we have today is a bunch of digital islands, silos that don't speak well to one another. And today we spoke to a lot of amazing L1 and L2s, and you being one of them. How do you see that playing out in 5 or 10 years with the competition that's been great to drive all these innovations like Aptos, with regards to interoperability? Do you see a world where there's hundreds of different L1s and L2s and some type of interoperability, or do you think it's a very small number of really, really good ones like an Aptos, and the rest of them kind of just die or fall off? Like, where do you see that evolution going? So that we don't recreate the same issues we have in the existing financial systems with lack of interoperability.
So I can answer this question in multiple ways, and I guess given the time says 000, well, I think you're absolutely right. Like, the financial system is incredibly fragmented, and that introduces latency, cost, and all these other crappy inefficiencies, and all these players just holding on to their businesses, which is a very difficult problem to solve for. If you had to say, I want to recreate the financial system today from scratch, right? Ideally, majority of that exists within one network. Because if you have multiple networks, again, you're still creating the same islands. They're just connected better. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of risk within bridges. There's a lot of security challenges that come into making sure that that interoperability works. And so I don't know necessarily. And to kind of answer that in a very direct way, I guess, is like, how many of these interoperable networks today are adding value in the traditional financial system? Absolutely zero. No big bank cares, no asset manager cares. And so if you want to fast forward into the future, where will network effects amalgamate? My view is in one, maybe two protocols. If you're, I don't see another recreation of all these different fragmented protocols. Now, Chris has written a really good book called Read, Write, Own. Great, it's on the shelf, so it's my plug. I think I get paid for every sell. Oh, they're free.
Yeah, they're free, so it doesn't work out.
Um, and I think he just like flips this question on its head by saying, Facebook is not a company; it's a social protocol. And all of these companies have their own, protocol, their own network. And so these networks will need to be interoperable. And today they are not necessarily interoperable. Now, will those networks build on one L1? I hope it's Aptos. That is the goal. And I do think that there will be some kind of centralization around a decentralized network, funny enough. So that's kind of my view. So hopefully that answers your question.
That was very direct. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Also, sorry, I was going to say on the books, the two that I've read are obviously The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So please grab that one. Ben does a great job of helping navigate all the challenges that you'll see. The second book that was very interesting that has no cover on it is Scaling People. That's a good one because you're not going to be who you are tomorrow. You should not be. You're going to be evolving day by day, moment by moment, and so that's a good book that just helped ground my perspective. So those are my two book recommendations.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mo.